Today, we're diving into an ancient legal text to solve what is basically a detective story. Let's call it the case of the imperfect offering. So imagine a ceremony so important, so sacred, that a single misplaced finger could make the whole thing worthless. We're about to jump into the super high-stakes world of the ancient temple service, a place of incredible precision, to figure out what on earth made a perfect offering so difficult to pull off. Okay, so to crack this case, we first need to get a feel for let's call it the crime scene. We have to understand the world where this all went down, a world that was absolutely obsessed with precision. You got to think of the ancient temple less like a modern place of worship and more like a divine operating room. Seriously, every single action, every material, every word, it all had a specific purpose. Precision wasn't just a nice to have, it was everything. Now, at the very heart of our story is this one single action. It's called the kemiza, or the handful removal. A priest reaches into a meal offering, scoops out one perfect handful of flour, and puts it on the altar. That one scoop? That was the whole ballgame. So, scooping a handful of flour. Sounds pretty simple, right? Well, it turns out the rule book for just this one action was surprisingly long. Let's take a look at the rules of the game here. An ancient text called the Mishna gives us this incredibly long list of ways you could mess this up. Now, don't worry, you don't need to memorize any of this. The whole point is just to get a sense of the sheer complexity wrapped around this one little action. First off, let's talk about who is even allowed to do the scooping. The offering was totally invalid if it was done by a non-priest, a priest who was in mourning, uncircumcised, or ritually impure. And get this, even a fully qualified priest could be disqualified if they forgot to wear the right clothes or hadn't washed their hands and feet. The status of the person was absolutely critical. And then there's how they did it. Used your left hand? Nope, invalid. Did it while sitting down? Invalid. Standing on a bucket, an animal, or even someone else's feet? All invalid. The scoop itself had to be perfect. Not too little, like with just your fingertips, and not so much that it spilled over. Even scooping up one tiny pebble by accident could ruin the entire offering. The level of detail here is just wild. All right, so with all of those intense rules in our heads, we can finally get to our central puzzle, the clue that's hiding in plain sight, right there in the text. This is it. This is the line that starts the whole mystery. The Mishna kicks off its big list of rules by saying they apply to both the meal offering of a sinner and all other meal offerings. And this is where the ancient sages, our Talmudic detectives, just slam on the brakes. You see the problem, right? It sounds redundant. If the rules apply to all meal offerings, doesn't that already include a sinner's offering? It's like saying, this applies to all cars, including Toyotas. Why say it? This feels like a sloppy mistake in a text that's famous for being incredibly precise. So, the detectives get to work. And our first lead, our first major theory, comes from a famous sage named Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Shimon points out a really important clue. A sinner's offering is designed to be less fancy. It's for atonement, not for a celebration. The law actually makes sure that, quote, his offering will not be of superior quality. And here's the breakdown of what that means. A regular offering had flour, plus some expensive oil and fragrant frankincense. That's the superior quality. But the sinner's offering? It was just plain flour. That's it. Lesser quality. This difference is the key to Rabbi Shimon's whole theory. So here's the logic. You might think, okay, since the sinner's offering is intentionally basic, maybe the rules for handling it are a little more relaxed, right? Maybe you can be a little sloppier. Rabbi Shimon's theory is that the Mishna throws in those extra words specifically to shoot that idea down. It's basically saying, nope, even for this simple offering, every single one of those crazy rules still applies. No shortcuts. It's a really solid theory. Makes sense. Case closed, right? Well, not so fast. Because like any good detective story, there's a plot twist. Then, the Gemara, that's the massive commentary on the Mishna, comes in with this brilliant objection. It basically asks, okay, Rabbi Shimon, if that's true, what about all the other offerings that are also considered lesser? Why doesn't the text feel the need to spell it out for them too? Why is the sinner's offering getting special treatment? And to prove its point, the Gemara finds another law about sacrifices that just says all offerings. And everybody agrees that that simple phrase is good enough to include the lesser ones. So Rabbi Shimon's theory, kind of falls apart. That extra phrase can't just be a clarification. The puzzle is back, and now it's even more confusing. And this, my friends, brings us to the final reveal, the solution to our Talmudic mystery. So it turns out the answer has nothing to do with flour or priests or ritual purity at all. The answer is about us, the readers. It's about how we read and understand a complex document. It's all about brilliant editing. Okay, let's walk through this step by step. So first, a law that appeared earlier in the text had already been established as not following Rabbi Shimon's opinion. So a student reading through would naturally assume, okay, I guess we're not following Rabbi Shimon on this topic. But then comes our Mishna, and those extra words, they're basically a giant flashing signpost from the editor. They're a signal that says, hey, pay attention, this one's different. This law actually does follow Rabbi Shimon's view. And there you have it. What looked like a clumsy mistake, a flaw in the text, is actually an incredibly brilliant and intentional feature. It's a subtle piece of editorial genius, designed to guide the careful reader through super dense and tricky legal landscape. It really makes you think, doesn't it? What looks like a bug on the surface might actually be the most important feature of all. This ancient text teaches us a pretty timeless lesson, to look closer, to question our assumptions about what a mistake is. And it leaves us with a totally modern question. What other flaws in the systems all around us, in technology, in art, even in our laws, are actually brilliant features just waiting for us to understand them?